So intentional listening is something that we do to show respect. If someone's sharing about their faith or something that's very meaningful to them, we want to give our undivided attention. And we do it to help the person in the sharing process. So, I don't know if you've been in a Black church where people talk back to the preacher and do the amens and the come on, bring it on, get it over. It's it's intentional listening gives the storyteller encouragement to bring it. When we listen with intention, we can recognize places in the conversation where we might want to ask a question or where there's an invitation to go deeper. So it could be a surface anecdote, somebody saying something that happened that week, but you're hearing something deeper in it. You go, maybe there's something underneath that. So one way to spot those places is to listen for where there is passion and energy and emotion. So I told Steve a story about a time when somebody said something to me that just shot my energy level up. But yeah, as I'm telling the story, I was doing that. So if Steve if this was a conversation if he'd wanted to go deeper, he might have gone back to that moment. It's like, wow, what was happening in your spirit when you heard those words, blah, blah, blah. If the person gets excited about what they're saying, that's a good place. If they feel strongly about what they're saying, if you detect pain or sorrow, and we detect those from facial expressions, from body movements, from tone of voice, that might be a time to stop and invite somebody to go a little bit deeper. Words or phrases that feel particularly weighty. I felt trapped, or I feel trapped, or I'm on top of the world, or my life is going nowhere. Those are pretty loaded phrases. So you can listen for those. And sometimes we want to give somebody prompts for storytelling. We have a combination of conversations that happen naturally and conversations that we have initiated because we want them to be spiritual conversations. And that's something that we'll talk more about next week when we're talking about holy conversations and inviting people to more. But the kind of prompt can be, think of a time when you felt close to or far away from God. When we did that earlier in the course, we had questions that were meant to help you reflect and enrich your answers. How did you feel in that event? What did you learn about God? Asking those kinds of questions in spiritual conversation has the same effect. It helps the person who's sharing share more deeply. So what do you say? Open-ended questions versus yes or no questions. I don't know what happened to that little bullet, but it got out of order. That's what happened. So open-ended questions versus yes or no questions. Yes or no questions was it cold? Yeah. You haven't gotten anywhere with that question. And feeling questions versus fact questions. So what was that like for you? Is a better way to go deeper than what happened next. How did that make you feel? What makes you say that? Can you tell me more about? What do you imagine God might say about that? If you can't think of a question, or even if you can, sometimes just paraphrasing what you hear helps the person elaborate on that. So validate the emotion. It sounds like you were very moved by what your friend did for you, or I can see why that would be frustrating. In a storytelling session or a conversation that we want to be a holy conversation, a spiritual conversation, there's also a time for sharing of ourselves so that the other person knows we're in the room too. It establishes mutuality so that the conversation is about both of you. If you have something from your own history that relates to what that person is saying, consider bringing it into the conversation. It could be as simple as, oh, I love it when that happens, or I hate it when that happens, or sharing a longer story. You know, that story reminds me of something, or I went through something similar. The point is to make the person feel understood, to let them know I get you, not to grab the spotlight away from them or grab the microphone away and say, oh, good, I've heard your story. Now I'm going to tell you mine. We don't want to make it about us if we're in a listening mode. There's times when we're the storyteller, we need to make it about us. And we don't try to one up somebody. I know people that any story they hear, they counter with one of their own. And it sometimes makes me feel not heard. So you'll just know, it's just there's ways to bring ourselves into the conversation. As we're thinking about sharing ourselves, we're looking at being more conscious and intentional about it. So we're listening for passion, energy, excitement, and buzzwords. We're inviting the other person to go deeper. We're reflecting back what we hear and see and sense. We ask feeling questions. Tell me more about blank.